We've gone through our individual player coverage and have given you background and analysis in detail on 19 of the top wide receivers of the 2019 NFL Draft Class. Today, we're looking at the best of the rest as we continue to roll through over 50 prospects in total right here on our host, DynastyLeagueFootball.com.
The NFL Draft Profile Series, NFL Prospects. Break it down, let's get it. People's pen and the gridiron scholar. Time to do it major. Let's see who running the field. Let's analyze the data. Yeah, let's go.
So today we're going to round out the rest of the wide receiver coverage as we did with the quarterbacks and the running back. Apologies on the running back video. There were some technical difficulties, but hopefully you got the message nonetheless. These are kind of more like podcasts, if you will, between John and I. We're going to go over a bunch of players. Today we're looking at the wide receivers, which, as I mentioned, we've covered 19 of them. The reason that number is significant to me, John, is because over the last 10 years, an average of 31.9 wide receivers are drafted. And over the last 5 years, that number's increased by 1 to an average of 33 even. We can roughly assume 32 wide receivers will be drafted this year. So trying to figure out which 32 those are is the key and the challenge. I think the 19 we've covered individually are pretty safe. We're going to expand on that a little more today. Of these guys, it's really such a deep class. And I think the number that get drafted speak to why every year it just feels like the wide receiver position is so deep. You have over 30 being taken. It's the most drafted offensive position outside of the linemen. It's right up there with DBs, which are trying to stop these wide receivers, and linebackers. Never have there been 40 or more taken. So just keep that in mind. Keep the 32 number in mind when you're trying to figure out just what to make of all of these guys that we've been discussing, as well as, you know, ones that we don't even have time to get to that you hear other people breaking down. John, the best of the rest. Who are some of the guys that stick out to you the most?
You know, Andy, when I'm looking at wide receivers this deep into the class, I'm looking for wide receivers who can offer a skill set in which they can hopefully win at the NFL level. Obviously, there's going to be some holes in their games, but these are players who I like if a coaching staff decides to employ them in a certain way in which they can use that skill, they may be successful. So I'm going to identify two in which I think have extraordinary unique skills that can succeed in the NFL. First one is Penny Hart out of Georgia State. He's 5'8", 180 pounds, Andy. He's not an X receiver. I don't know if he can function at the Y, but he does have that unique quick twitch ability to survive as a slot receiver in the NFL. Hey, I watched him play in the Sun Belt Conference for the last 4 years. He had back-to-back 1,000-yard campaigns before this last season. Unfortunately, he wasn't as dominant this year as he was the years before. But during his career, he had 203 receptions, and he averaged over 14 yards per reception. He had a very nice 40, a 4.55, but he's really a quick-twitch athlete who I believe can plug and play into the offensive system. Now, Andy, I know you saw him at the Senior Bowl, correct? What do you think of Penny Hart?
I did, and I was actually really surprised because he was one of the clear winners from the Senior Bowl week. Everybody was talking about him, and then he was snubbed by the Combine. So I thought that was a little shocking, to be perfectly honest. He is a dynamic athlete. You mentioned he's 5'8", but he doesn't play like that at all, and that's kind of evidence of how he played in college. He lined up mostly on the outside with a lot of looks as the X receiver. So this wasn't just a slot guy in college, although that's where he'll likely figure to play at the next level. Now, he was lined up mostly with Andy Isabella and Hunter Renfrow, who I'll get into in a moment, and he just looked uber explosive, uber athletic in comparison to just basically everybody there. I mean, the strength, the quickness. He was basically telling DBs, I'm going to cut left, and I'm going to tell you when I'm going to cut left, and I'll give you the blueprint for what my route is, and you're still not going to be able to stop me. I mean, that's just how dynamic and athletic he is. He's a ferocious blocker, violent and aggressive as well. So, I mean, there's a lot of I hate to say this word because I don't want that to be kind of the bar, but there's a lot of Steve Smith in him in that regard. He's an aggressive player. So there's a lot I do like about Penny Hart. And as I mentioned, the biggest shock for me was that he was snubbed by the Combine. The other guy that was lined up at the slot predominantly at Mobile for the Senior Bowl was Hunter Renfrow. And you look at this guy, and he looks boring. He looks plain. But he continues to get it done. He's got 2 rings to his name. The production isn't there, but he's a reliable target to move the chains on first downs in the red zone. I mean, Clemson's not winning 2 national titles without Hunter Renfrow in that offense. And he just finds a way to get things done. He's a lunch pail kind of guy. You know, I've seen some people have him top 5 amongst the wide receivers in this class, which I think is a little a little crazy and a little absurd, but it really speaks to what you said, where you're looking for guys that have a skill and a trait that they can win at. And Hunter Renfrow consistently wins in the slot. So small hands, speed, quickness, whatever, throw all that to the side. He just finds a way to get it done. Do you have any notes on Renfrow? Is he somebody that you're intrigued by, or is there somebody else that would leap ahead of Renfrow for you?
I like Renfrow. I have him much further down than Penny Hart. I do think he has enough athletic ability. When you look at his combine, his burst skills, his explosion, and his agility, they're all very good. His straight line speed isn't terrific, but that's kind of what you see on film. And, in this Clemson offense, he was clearly, they have so many dominant wide receivers. You think about the players that he has played with. He's not going to get a ton of production. But when they called on him, Hunter Renfrow did produce, and he actually won Clemson a title when he was a sophomore, catching the game-winning touchdown pass from Deshaun Watson. But the one player that I think also has a unique skill that is going to translate to the NFL, Andy, he's the complete opposite of Penny Hart. And that is West Virginia wideout David Sills, who is going to use his size and his athletic ability. He's over 6'3" and well over 200 pounds. The last 2 years at West Virginia, he has scored 33 touchdowns. Now, what an interesting backstory. He originally came to the Mountaineers as a quarterback, and then the team basically told him to transfer and play wide receiver. He didn't want to. So then he goes to a junior college, plays quarterback, kind of comes to the realization that's not his future, comes back to Morgantown, and plays wide receiver and has been tremendous the last 2 seasons with 125 receptions and over 1,900 yards receiving. I think with his size and athletic ability, you look at the combine, the 40-yard dash, the 3-cone drill, and the 20-yard shuttle all display good athleticism. But he's got very good hands, and he knows how to use that body. So I think there's going to be a team that is going to draft David Sills later in the draft, probably in the 4th or 5th round, and they're going to use him either on the X or sometimes motion him into the slot for the mismatch against the smaller cornerback. I think that size is going to translate with his hands and his knowledge of the game. I like him a lot at the NFL level. What do you think, Andy?
So Sills, I hope the team that drafts him is the same one that takes Will Grier, because they have a nice chemistry and rapport going, and he was definitely the security blanket for Will Grier. But, for me, he's solid, and it ends there. I mean, there's something to be said for those 33 touchdowns. He's a reliable sideline and red zone target. But he reminds me more of Marcel Aitman, which is to say I think he's got a decent enough floor, but I think he's got a limited ceiling. For me, he and his teammate Gary Jennings were more beneficiaries of Will Grier being a better quarterback than we may realize at this time. So I'm not completely sold on Sills. Just he hasn't done anything really to differentiate himself. You see the touchdowns and it jumps out at the page at you, but it kind of ends there. And again, I'm not trying to diminish touchdowns. That's the name of the game. But that was, to me, the product of the system more so than it was to him. He's a nice receiver, but a nice receiver. One of the guys that stood out more to me at the Senior Bowl week was a smaller school guy, and that's UC Davis's Keelan Doss. Now, UC Davis ranks 38th in academics in the nation, and Doss plays like the smart man that would attend that university. He's also got monster production, 321 receptions, 4,069 yards, 28 touchdowns in his time there. Great size. He apparently ran the 40 in the 4.4s at his pro day, had 18 scouts in attendance looking for him. This guy was really showing some decisive route running and intricate route running and really making some tremendous catches during his time in Mobile. Another guy that stood out to me, another larger frame guy, was Old Dominion's Travis Fulgham. I view him as a possession receiver at the next level. He has a nice large frame. I was most impressed by his confidence and trust in his routes during the Senior Bowl. He had a knack for not unveiling the route until the end, and it looked like he had been working with the QBs on timing for far longer than just a few days. John, do Keelan Doss or Travis Fulgham do anything for you?
I definitely am interested in Keelan Doss, Andy. I think he's fascinating. You had mentioned it. He was a 3-time All-American at the FCS level, so he didn't get to the FBS until finally this season. Now, he wasn't unbelievable at UC Davis, and it's hard to get a lot of film on him playing at the lower level. But you mentioned his pro day, 4.45. So for a man with his size, over 6'2" and well over 200 pounds, he has the frame to play in the NFL. He shows us that he has the speed for the NFL, and the little bit of film that I could watch on him, he clearly has athletic ability and breakaway speed. So I do like him. I think he's a 5th-round draft pick. He runs smooth routes for what I saw. He separates well. He has quick breaks, and he has nice-sized hands. I really think Doss can make it on an NFL team. I expect him, he probably needs some time to get used to the speed of the game. But when you have that much size and you have that much production, even though it's at a lower level, I think an NFL team is going to give him an opportunity to be successful. And Travis Fulgham is interesting because he's a very late bloomer at Old Dominion. I'm not sure if he's going to get drafted. I picked him up, and I mentioned him in my college fantasy football waiver wire gemstones sometime in about early October, and he just closed out his collegiate career. He was dominant like the last 8 weeks of his college career. So I think he's an undrafted free agent type of player. Not sure if he's going to make a roster, but I clearly think he could have a practice squad role. You know, if there was a minor league of NFL football, I think he would be perfect for that. But I'm not sure where he's going to fit right away on an NFL team. Now, if he continues to work like he did in college, I think he's going to have a role down the field. But I'll tell you, a big-bodied receiver who I find fascinating, but he's got some off-the-field challenges. So I have him from a athletic standpoint and talent standpoint, a fifth-round grade. But there are some challenges with Preston Williams of Colorado State. 6'4", 211 pounds. He was just completely dominant this year for the Rams. Now, he's a transfer from Tennessee. It didn't work out with Tennessee. He had some legal issues, so he ends up transferring. But he had a 37% target share at Colorado State this year. In college, he had 112 career receptions for 14.2 yards per average. Now, his pro day was disappointing, 4.53. It would have been nice to see him go about 4.49, and his agility and those scores weren't terrific either. So he kind of fell down the charts. At one point, Mel Kiper had him in the top 10. I thought that was a little bit much for a kid with, some challenges in his background. But I think Preston Williams can play in the NFL. Unfortunately, I think some teams are just not even going to have him on their draft board, Andy, because of the off-field concerns. But I think he can play in the NFL. He's another big-body receiver in this class. What do you see in Preston Williams, or what do you think about him, my friend?
So he's the next in line at Colorado State following Rashard Higgins and Michael Gallup. I mean, this program is just flush with these super productive tall receivers, but we haven't seen any of them really materialize yet at the next level. He mentioned he had a bad pro day. He's got some off-the-field concerns that looming as well. So I'm kind of staying away from him. I think you were kind of taking a dig at the AAF, talking about the minor leagues of football, but one of those guys that would probably thrive in that kind of a system would be Ashton Dulin, who was the small school Division II darling of this year's class. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention DeMarcus Lodge, dare I say, the best of the Ole Miss receivers. And of course, when we talk about A.J. Brown and DK Metcalf, we're talking about two that many have going, some have them in the first round as the top two receivers in this class. And they're the third amigo there, DeMarcus Lodge, feels like a combination of what Brown and Metcalf do rolled into one player. So I think he might actually, down the road, wind up being the best of the bunch. Are there any other wide receivers you wanted to touch on before we wrapped up? I mean, of course, we're missing some names. So, let us know in the comments who you think should be in this discussion for top 25 receivers that we may have missed. But, John, do you have any others that you'd like to add, or are we good to wrap it up here?
There's one other player who I think could be interesting, and I put him in my under-the-radar prospects on footballdiehards.com. It is Antoine Wesley out of Texas Tech. 6'4", 206 pounds, uber productive. Now, obviously, that's the Red Raiders offense. We know they're going to produce, and the wide receivers are going to catch a lot of passes in that offense. But I do think he has a skill set and the athletic ability to translate down the road. Now, his combine scores were not as good as I had hoped, but I think he's a big-body receiver who's going to be a sixth-round draft pick. And with some patience and time to develop, I think Antoine Wesley at Texas Tech could make an impact in the NFL.
All right, another good name. And again, just, this is a deep position. So
it's
obviously
unbelievable.
we are definitely leaving some guys off the board that you probably wish we were talking about. So let us know in the comments. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Like the video if you don't mind, if you enjoyed what we covered today. Go check out John's written work at footballdiehards.com. You can check out a whole host of other podcasts and articles on dynastyleaguefootball.com and my newly launched and created expandtheboxscore.com, which is giving you the metrics, all the details, every touch of every college player from 2018 to 2016, and we're going back to add historical context as well. And last but not least, we're available in audio form. So if you prefer to listen as opposed to watch, you can check us out. Any outlet that you listen to your podcast on, we're there. Just search my name and we should come up, and that'll do it. So hopefully you enjoyed our wide receiver segment today, the best of the rest. Thanks for tuning in to our 2019 NFL Draft Profile Series.